Welcome back to the EVOG podcast. I'm Brian G., the EVOG, and we've owned 8 EVs in the last 11 and a half years across 4 different brands, and we currently have 5 EVs in our family. That's not even counting my brother and his family, who also have multiple EVs. This EVOG channel is all about sharing my experiences with EVs, having driven them now for over a decade, connecting with other EV enthusiasts or people who are just interested in EVs, and also learning, right? I want to keep learning about EVs, learning about the people who are interested in them or looking to adopt, right? So please subscribe to this channel if you'd like to join me on that journey. Now, as usual for this EVOG monthly podcast, I'm joined by my friend Adam from Adam's Everything EV. Adam, welcome back.
Thanks for having me. This is always a pleasure. We've actually got a chunk of stuff to talk about in August, where July was a little dry as far as industry-wise. I've got new cars. You're talking about your new car. There's stuff going on in the industry. We got plenty of places to go, and I'm really excited to break it all down with you today.
Awesome, man. Well, why don't we get into this? But before I do, please subscribe to Adam's Everything EV if you aren't already as well. He's got a new Model 3 Highland in the garage. He just published a great video on the Ioniq 5N.
Yeah, I mean, it's the most fun you can have on 4 wheels, honestly, EV or not. I definitely encourage you to check that out, and do the same for Brian. If you're watching this right now, just go down below, hit that subscribe, and let's get into this.
Awesome, man. So the thing that brought us together, and I think a lot of our subscribers got us on their radar, was around Fisker, right? You and I were both Fisker Ocean owners. And we've both gotten out of the ocean. And oddly enough, I'm up here on Cape Cod for the summer. And earlier today, as my daughter and I were driving around on the Cape, I actually saw 2 Fisker Oceans. It was somewhat surreal to see them on the road and, you know, just driving around. I wish I had had the opportunity to, stop and have a conversation with the owners, but that opportunity wasn't there. If it does present itself, I'll be all over that. But there's been a lot going on to your earlier point. Why don't we start with the bankruptcy and the status on that?
Yeah, sure. Just kind of a quick breakdown. Chapter 11 is going to continue. The cash collateral order is kind of the new thing that everybody's talking about. That's what's being moved forward. And the real shocker is that it looks like it's going to be liquidated, Fisker that is, from Chapter 11 instead of Chapter 7. And it's going to yield what looks to me like some benefits for general unsecured creditors. That's everybody except the note holder, which is Heights Capital Management. And the deal is like 85% of the Austria and 15% of the rest is going to go to Heights. And that's at up to $40 million. And then the numbers change to 50-50 afterwards. And then that number switches for, obviously, the general unsecured creditors. That's everybody, Microsoft and TomTom and literally everybody else, Google and us as well, are us owners, people who have filed that proof of claim. So the settlement's there, and what it really tells a story of is this is going to not be too beneficial for anyone at all. That's kind of the most top of mind thing that's going on. There's another hearing. I'll have a video about it as soon as possible. I don't want to quote anything yet because I haven't really been able to dig deep enough, but based on what the documents filed are saying, this collateral order is basically done with instructions on how things are going to go forward. Now, also recently, TomTom has decided they're going to back out, and that's of American Lease as well. So September 12th, we'll find out how that goes. But that's really interesting. The navigation is going to be gone. As far as updates on that, nobody's had any words about what's going on there.
This whole thing, as you and I have talked about off camera, is tiresome, man. Fisker has been liquidating for months now, right? So that's point one. Point two, and we've both done a little bit of research. I've done a little, you've done a lot on bankruptcy, but I think we both know that Chapter 11 is typically a restructure for continuing operations, right? Looking to come back from the dead, if you will. And it just blows my mind that they continue to go down the path of a Chapter 11 when everything that they're doing seems to indicate that they're liquidating, and once that's done, you know, it's good night, Irene. So I don't quite have my head wrapped around what's actually
I can definitely help you there. Up until very recently, I didn't either. Chapter 11 is a restructuring tool. Let's just call it that, right? But if you flip the tool around, you can use it for other things. So what they're doing is a Chapter 11 liquidation. And instead of one trustee who's in control of everything, that would be a Chapter 7 trustee. This plan stays in Chapter 11, but at the liquidation capacity. So you can liquidate through Chapter 11. And the whole point of that is control. And the control has been defined by this cash collateral order and settlement proposal, where there's two different basically controlling entities. And one is the committee and the other is Heights. And those sections of ownership are going to move. The IP is going to go to Heights. So whoever, Fisker's being bought out, that's over. Heights is going to own what's left of Fisker's IP. They're staying in 11, which means control can be, let's say, manipulated, instead of 7, where it's one trustee that does it all. And then the 11 also allows for that continued functionality of the company, allowing the American lease sale to go through, and then the recalls, which we can get into in a second, and everything else kind of administrative within Fisker, right? And so, and obviously all the administrative stuff, that's the lawyers and the leases and all that other stuff, is all dictated in there as well. So Chapter 11 can be used as a liquidation tool. And actually, in the very first document that they put through after the bankruptcy basically proposal, it's always said liquidation. It's just that us non-lawyers, I don't ever pretend to be a lawyer. I'm just researching and trying to provide a perspective from my knowledge base. Us non-lawyer people kind of find that hard to grasp. And I feel like you and I were in that exact same camp until recently, when I've kind of just had to force myself to understand exactly what's going on. Linda Richendorfer, that's the U.S. trustee, even said in the initial hearing, she's like, there's another alternative that you guys aren't talking about, because they're talking about a trustee and they're talking about Fisker or Heights being in control. She's like, there could be a Chapter 11 trustee. And in fact, in this case, there will be two, one from the perspective of the committee and one from the perspective of Heights Capital. And those will be the two governing sections. I'll put it on the screen. I kind of summarized it in a recent video, but yeah, what an absolute mess.
Well, you had me at control and manipulation, right? Both those things are very, very much on brand for Fisker. Was there anything you wanted to touch on? And by the way, I got to reiterate my personal thought that the work, all of the effort and the diligence that you've put into really understanding what's going on, sitting through these hearings, which I'm sure are mind-numbingly boring, so that you can bring this information to the Fisker community. Adam, is yeoman's work on your part. So kudos for continuing to do that work and to keep the Fisker community informed. And one of those kudos is for the get, right, of getting Berman to come on and, probably the busiest lawyer in the country to come on and spend almost a half an hour with you. Can you imagine if he billed you his hourly rate or a fraction thereof for the time?
I wouldn't be on this laptop talking to you. I would have had to liquidate as well. So yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah, so great get. Was there anything else that you wanted to mention about that, other than referring folks, obviously, to check out that video?
Well, I know you have. Yeah, they definitely should check out the video. I can link that. But for those of you who are just watching Brian's channel, there's a 30% fee when it comes to Hagens Berman if you are Chase oriented, and that interview was about Chase, right? Kind of unspecifically, but basically the fact that they are the lender that did the advertising for Fisker in the capacity, and because of bankruptcy, they are now being held responsible as a holder in due course. Those are the legal terms. I don't want to get into a bunch of legalese with you, but there's a 30% fee. It's like I mentioned on that video, Edgar Snyder, that's our Pittsburgh guy. He's the injury lawyer. We don't get paid unless we get money for you. And he always points at the screen. I'll never forget it. It was like every third ad on the TV as a kid. But that's the same rule here. There's no fee unless they get a decision. And then how is the fee paid if you get a buyback? Obviously, you need to be made whole, but then do you take 30% of your, being made whole and your vehicle going away? The answer is no. Your previous payments to Chase can be used to pay the fee. It could be in the law of the arbitration. In fact, I believe it is that in the event of a favorable decision, the legal fees are paid by Chase out of pocket, which is going to be a great benefit for most people. In the event that you get a settlement and it's like, I want to keep the car, or in my case, or some other people's case, I've refinanced or I no longer have the car, it comes out of your settlement. And obviously that will reduce your settlement, but half of zero is still zero. So
I think I want to correct something you said, right? You said
Sure.
This was all about Chase. But
yes,
if I remember Berman correctly, one of the things that you had asked him about was, what about folks who financed through a credit union or through somebody other than Chase? And I believe his response there was, we'd have to look at the terms of your finance agreement, right? And that doesn't preclude you from reaching out to them. They'll look into that, right, and look to file arbitration if that's what's in your finance agreement, and in essence replicate what they're doing with Chase to whatever financial institution you went to for your loan. It's really just those of us who self-financed or paid cash or whatever that are kind of on the sidelines of this effort.
Yes. So you are in kind of a we don't know bubble in the event you financed with someone else, because what's going to happen is they'll have to be identified, that lender, as a holder in due course. The reason why it's so simple and easy in the Chase example is because it was literally called Fisker Finance. And so being a holder in due course is just pure obvious, right? But whereas another lender, there could be recourse, and I definitely encourage you, if you have a loan for a Fisker Ocean, reach out to Hagens Berman. You can reach out to any lawyer, but they're going to have basically the knowledge base of what's going on at Fisker to their advantage. So that could save you in legal fees and the amount billed, obviously, because they have that knowledge base and you don't have to pay for that. But I definitely encourage you to reach out to somebody, because yes, you're absolutely right. In the event that you didn't finance with Chase, you could still fall under the holder in due course rule if that can be found about your financial or lending institution. So yeah, very good point with that. And I am trying to keep all of this stuff, like, just because, I mean, this is impactful stuff, right? This can change your life financially. I'm not saying, your entire life, but these are major financial impacts, whether you've lost money with the vehicle, whether, you get a settlement, whether you get a buyback. That could be a massive financial swing, essentially. And so I'm trying to keep it as realistic as possible. But yes, absolutely, if in the event that you did get a loan, you can reach out.
Awesome. Again, huge getting Berman on the Adams Everything EV channel.
And I want to, before we go any further, his name is Paul Pressburger, He's a member of the FOA. He is not a board member. He's just a member of the FOA. He's a retired lawyer. He did the legwork there. So, Paul, if you're listening, you are, my thanks go out to you. So, the audience that, you and I have is just like you said, it's Fisker based. And so I guess probably because I've done all this digging and I'm like, 3/4 of the way down the mine shaft here, they were like, well, your audience would benefit from having this communication. And I can't thank anybody, everybody that was involved in this. Just thank you so much for helping me put it together. Obviously, a lot of the Higgins-Berman folks did a lot of legwork to get him on the channel. That 15, 20 minutes we spent together was definitely difficult to put together for him too. Like you said, he's one of the busiest lawyers in the country. But yeah, happy to answer any more questions you have about that, Brian. But that's pretty much what I got.
Let's move on from that. Again, great work there. Encourage folks to find that video and take a look at it. But we also had another recall. I guess it's number 5 or so.
Yeah,
that's currently open, but this is one that it's been out there for a while. The issue has been out there for a while. I think we both experienced some version of this loss of regen power, right? And I think we're both a little bit surprised that it's taken this long for this to result in a recall, right? Because we're talking about an issue here that is potentially pretty dangerous, where you're expecting a certain level of stopping power that just doesn't happen, right? Or it's delayed in terms of when it happens.
Well, I mean, we have an expectation. When you press the brake pedal, you will experience braking. And even in the event
or in an EV, right, release the accelerator.
Right. Yeah, that's exactly that's exactly the point I wanted to touch on, is that even in the event of regen, there's still an expectation there. So in the event that fails, you as a driver are either going to say to yourself, okay, my regen isn't kicking in, but from maybe, let's say, a less experienced EV driver, they're just like, my car isn't braking, my brakes don't work, right? And that's horrible. And the safety cannot be understated, the impact there. And I mentioned this 7 months ago in a video, and basically the owners that decided to comment on it were not kind, let's just say. And it is real, and now it's been done. And I believe the timing has to do with the fact of this is the end, right? And if they're going to try to fix it, well, they're going to have to say that that it was broken in the first place, because then I think there might be legal issues there if they don't. But yeah, it should have been talked about a long time ago. NHTSA knew about this. Fisker knew about this. I feel like everything was just a slow rolling train wreck with this vehicle.
So what about the fact that I think your video referenced October is when the over-the-air software update was expected? I mean, do you see Fisker being able to have some sort of viable operation in order to deliver on that for impacted owners?
So,
including American Lease.
I did talk about that in my recent video, and I'm not exactly sure where a lot of these communications come from, but one of the things that was communicated, and it looks to me to be like by Fisker, is that there's more to come on a deployment timeline for software 2.2. And I guess software 2.2 will be the final update, at least the Fisker administered one, the Fisker we know at least, and it should contain that braking solution. And I do think the fact that they're containing it within this kind of says that it will be the final one. But, it's all speculation from here. I don't know how we process this, though, because the complaints were there, the knowledge was there, and if I recall correctly, Fisker actually published that they had solved this problem with
that's a great point. Yes,
1.10 or 1.11.
Yep. I remember seeing them put that out there, and subsequent to them saying so, experiencing it in our ocean, right? So either the fix didn't take, or there's a credibility question there, along with many other credibility issues with these guys.
Yeah, perfect. Perfectly put. I don't know how else to say it.
Anything else on Fisker?
Nothing around this company or this car should be trusted. I did the Ioniq 5N video. Somebody commented that Fisker is superior in every way. That brought a smile to my face, a little bit of a chuckle, But I mean, I've gotten that since the beginning. I understand the idea of Fisker. If you remove the errors in the bankruptcy and the mismanagement and, some other things, then yeah, the idea was great. 360 miles, nice big roof, excellent range. That is real. The excellent range still exists. But, questions about driving dynamics, key fobs. I mean, we could talk forever, and I'm kind of tired of it. So we could move on for sure.
Yeah, we're definitely moving on. I'm not even going to dignify that comment with a response. I'll just let that one sit out there.
Fair enough.
Why don't we talk for a minute, though, about Fisker Ocean replacements?
Oh, yeah.
So you went down the path of, going back to a brand that you were familiar with. And as I'm saying this, we kind of did the same thing, because our choice, is our third Volvo, the XC40. And as I was looking at that vehicle, I was in a position where I was thinking, I'm going to get about $30K for our Fisker Ocean. What can I get into for about $30K that I'm going to feel good about, that my wife's going to feel good about? We took a significant loss on the Ocean, but in order to get out of it, it's not like I could just sell it, right? If I tried to do that, I was going to get a whole lot less. So the only way to do it effectively and efficiently was to trade it in on something. And so as I was looking at that Volvo, a couple of things stood out, right? It's the same form factor in terms of it being crossover SUV. It's super safe, right? Volvo's number one brand identification is around safety, right? The design is timeless. It's not as sexy as the Ocean for sure. I typically won't buy a vehicle that doesn't have glass roof or sunroof, right? So that was great. It had dual motor, all-wheel drive. It had over 400 horsepower across those dual motors. So this thing boogies, right? We're talking 4-second-ish 0 to 60, which is great. It also has an interior that is totally vegan's probably not the right word, but it's made with materials that are good for the environment. So that certainly spoke to me. And then we had the added benefit of actually getting a front trunk that once I did a little mod on it, and I appreciate you sharing the video I just published for anybody who really wants to drill in and get a good sense of it. I was able to just take out a couple of hex bolts and remove that plastic that was taking up a chunk, almost a third of the front trunk. And now it's super useful as a space that we've got. So just real pleased with the vehicle that we got into once we got out of the Ocean. The only thing that we don't really get that was a consideration is range, right? We went from 360 EPA to 328 EPA, right? And in our 3 months or so of driving this car, we're averaging about 240, right? But it's not a vehicle that we're going to use for our trips from Maryland to Cape Cod, right? So we've got other longer range EVs that we will use for that. So for daily commuting, it is perfect. And we're getting over-the-air updates. We've got, Google Assistant based software that works pretty well. So that's our experience. Why don't you talk a little bit about your experience?
Absolutely. Well, first, I showed that video. I encourage you heavily in the event you want to find out about that vehicle. Brian does a really wonderful in-depth job and even explains how to do that trunk modification, which I showed a little bit of. But definitely check that out because he really goes into detail about the benefits of that car. And I agree, both of us kind of went home on, what do we do next? The only other question before I get to my vehicle is, would you try it to Cape Cod? And if not, why?
I would. I absolutely would, right? My 2016 Model X 90D, right, it's about to, or it might have hit today, 131,000 miles on it, right? And so it's got free supercharging. I now have a supercharger 10 minutes from where I'm sitting right now. So that's how I'm charging it because it's super underutilized. That car it actually has less range than the Volvo, right? The top end charge gets me to about 220, right? And because it's a Model X, which is much bigger, it's not as efficient. And I've done this trip multiple times with the Model X. So I would absolutely do it without hesitation. I think, and I was trying to encourage my wife to do it, but she has the first world problem of if she does that, it means she doesn't get to drive the Rivian R1T.
Of course.
So I ain't mad at her at all, right? I would take the R1T all day long. It's super comfortable. She's traveling with our dog. That thing is faster. It's bigger. It's got access to the Tesla supercharger network, right? So, but I suggested that she do it because there's nothing like a long road trip to really connect you and familiarize you with your new vehicle, right? Which this is a new vehicle for her, but the last new vehicle that she took on a long road trip was our Ocean, and it did not go well. So I do not blame her for that and the fact that she's got Valkyrie or R1T.
So
once again, a quick point on the Volvo, Adam.
Yeah,
I would not buy this car new, and I wouldn't recommend anybody buy it new. Right, the XC40 Recharge new is north of $60K.
Yeah.
For the trim that we have, which is the ultimate top spec, right? And for what you get in terms of range at less than 250, I don't think the cost benefit is there. But in the used car market, where you get these vehicles in the 30s, yeah, I'll do that all day long, right? Because the value is there. And there's enough range. It charges at 150 kilowatt. So, and super comfortable, all the things. I would recommend it, but as a used EV.
Well, and then on that note, I think the net for you is you bought it new and you just experienced the same depreciation because you were able to get out of the Ocean before it got really bad. I don't know if you would have lost a whole bunch more value, had you just bought the XC40 Recharge new, right? Like if you were just to go to KBB right now, because you were smart about your trade, you didn't really end up taking that massive penalty that a lot of people refer to. I probably got hit a lot harder than you because I made a, let's say, more creator-focused decision when it came to my vehicle. I was like, let me try something totally new. I was very early in the Prologue sales.
So it was rare.
First 600, right. And so, that was And I, obviously I had to get out, and they offered me an offer that I couldn't refuse for a Hollywood quote. But I had my advantages were there, but I do think that your outcome is, really good because, like you said, you still get the horsepower. You still have a sunroof. The Google Assistant is it's going to beat the pants off of TomTom all the time. The driver assistance is good. You've got a frunk. You've got space underneath the trunk. All as depicted in his video. Make sure you check out Brian's video about it. But really, you've ended up with a wonderful result. And I think that I wouldn't have taken this journey into non-Tesla EVs for my daily had I not been Fiskered, if you will.
We're making it a verb now.
I didn't coin it, but yeah, it was, I don't know, 2.5 months ago, maybe somebody reached out to me and said, hey, we should turn this into a verb. So whoever, who you are, I'll give you credit. I believe it was a patron. Could have just been a viewer, but I got an email about it, and well done.
I like it.
Yeah. But yeah, the just on the note of the Prologue, Tony at this point is getting, if he's not frustrated, he's a saint, because I've had his interview for a month now. In fact, this hat is from Gettysburg, where we met up. He has the press color Prologue, and I've had him on the channel with his Extreme previously. But I'm doing a full in-depth dive. And when I say in-depth, like, I think the runtime right now is at like 42 minutes, and I'm nowhere near done. Like, if it's going to be everything that you've ever needed to know about the Honda Prologue, that's coming out soon. It's in my, full deep dive format, complete with stupidity, memes, and, sarcasm to 11. Definitely subscribe to the channel. Just for this podcast, the Prologue is an absolutely blessing. It's just a blessing. I can't describe how good it is. Now, it's not an Ioniq 5N. You have a Model S, and you've told me about, I go out and I experience it. You talk to me, off camera about a track day you had one time. So you really have become familiar with the limits of the car, and it's fun to take it up to those limits. I have no idea what it's like to floor the Prologue. I've never pressed it that far. I never will. For me, it's those performance elements I don't care. I wish I did, but I don't care. I floored the Tesla a few times when I had it, but the fact that I know when I do it, it's not going to be impressive it's actually better for me. I know that I'm not going to do it. And so other than that horsepower, the Prologue is excellent. Now, it is not agile. It is not small. It doesn't feel small. Somebody in a comment mentioned it doesn't drive like a Honda. It does not. Hondas kind of feel low to the ground, and they have a little bit
go-karty.
Yeah, they really do. And even the SUVs, they've that design, that performance language, it goes throughout even into the trail sports, pilots, and passports. It's there. The Ridgeline, it's there. But this one doesn't. It's not like that. It drives like an Escalade because it's a GM product, almost the size of a Tahoe, and so that's the driving experience. But that's what you do. You drive it slowly. It's got wonderful adaptive cruise. And to me, if somebody asked me what's your favorite thing about the Honda Prologue, it is the normal setting in one pedal driving. No one can beat that. Tesla can't beat that. Whatever they did, because I know they have experience with, the Bolt and the Volt, and the EV1 for that matter.
So when you talk about beating it, what's so great about that setting?
There's no aggression, but it always stops on time. That's the best way to describe.
I've been up here on the Cape, and I'm going to be back in Maryland, hopefully by the end of next weekend, and we have to get together again.
Okay.
And maybe drive each other's cars, because the Volvo's one pedal driving is the best I've ever experienced. And we've had ADVs across 4 brands. ADVs across 4 brands. By far, it's the best. It's better than Tesla. It's better than Rivian. obviously better than Fisker. Um, I don't know what they did, but that one pedal drive in the Volvo XC40, it's chef's kiss. It's so well tuned. So I'm definitely interested to have you experience it, right, and do the same with the Prologue, and maybe we can compare. But that's another thing that I would say about the Volvo. That one pedal driving is awesome.
Yeah, I'm definitely willing to. And then on the and I like I said, I do not doubt your opinion, and I know that you may hop into the Prologue and be like, this normal setting doesn't do it for me. But the other thing is the high setting, which like is a Tesla. Anyway, the bad thing is the seat settings don't work. I can't get them to work. It has a 2-seat memory.
So driver memory, the memory setting
Does not work.
Okay.
Does not work. Oh, the other thing I was going to say, the other good thing I'll mention about the Prologue that really stands out is there's no drive modes. Nothing. No changes. You get in, it's a Prologue. That's it.
So the
I love that.
Volvo has one that you can go to an off-road setting, but other than that, it's just the one. Rivian has several. Tesla doesn't really have drive modes, and for a while there, I was thinking, well, why do we really need different drive modes? I get it with a truck where there's different use cases there, but
No, that's a good
I don't know.
segue.
Maybe you want to touch on that in the context of the 5N.
That's a good segue because I didn't think drive modes were necessary either until I drove this 5N. The viewer is named Matt, and that's all he wanted to be identified as. This is just a goodness of his heart gift to me.
Thank you, Matt.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you, Matt. He's a Fisker Ocean One owner, so he was a viewer of the channel, and he made a very kind statement to me. He says, "As long as I watch your channel, I don't need any other updates." So that was high praise, especially in that cesspool of a update rich environment. But I never thought you would need drive modes until the Ioniq 5N. And the reason why it's so deep, because within each drive mode, there are alternate sets of drive modes. And then once you get towards allowing all the performance, then you can get into what percentage delivery. It becomes like the Rivian for off-road, right? But in on-road. That's probably my favorite way to describe it. Because I feel like the Rivian is the most customizable vehicle on earth when it comes to off-road, but on-road, it's the same with the 5N. And I never thought any of that was necessary, but experiencing the auditory input in that context with 3-second 0 to 60 speed and the way it's tuned, it cannot be beat. I would argue it's better than a Model 3 Performance, which is kind of the benchmark of the benchmark, and then I guess the only other one is the Model S Plaid. But wow. And you put me on, and I want to mention these as well, to the U-Drag.
Yeah, if for the audience, if you haven't seen the Edmunds U-Drags, it's something I've started to take a look at. Especially after Adam's video on the Ioniq 5N. The straight line, like you said, the Tesla straight line 0 to 60, quarter mile sprint drag races have become somewhat tiresome, right? Because 99%, 98% of the time, I know who's going to win those races. The U-Drags takes them out about a quarter of a mile. Then they've got to brake hard, make essentially a U-turn, hence the name U-Drags, around these cones, and then get back up to speed another quarter mile back. So those races are so much fun. And these guys switch cars after the first run. So it's not just solely based on the proficiency of the driver, right?
And lanes,
to launch
too.
it.
They switch lanes.
Exactly. They're also switching lanes. So just a ton of fun, man. And being able to see the Ionic 5N dust everything essentially. I don't think it's lost a race yet, right?
They haven't put it up against the Model 3 Performance or the Plaid. I believe both of those will beat it, but maybe not,
So
because
I'm pretty sure I've seen it against the Model 3 Performance and it won.
okay,
I don't. You're right. I don't think that it can beat the Plaid, but that's going to depend. It may depend on something as simple as, does the Plaid that they use have the upgraded, what do they call the upgraded brake package, right? Because the standard Plaid doesn't have that, right? I
right.
know Kyle Connor's Plaid has the upgraded brake package, right? So I think that could potentially factor into it, right? And the other thing that they're doing is on the, once they make the U-turn, the N-Grin boost inside the Ionic 5N, which only gives you 10 seconds of additional horsepower. They use it once that U-turn's been completed, right? So
Right.
that's my speculation is the braking package. If you don't necessarily have this braking package, that might make it a much closer race, right? Because this race also is going to test that, especially if that Plaid is going full out, right? And then they've got to hit it, especially on that second run that they do when
Right.
those brakes get super hot. So would love to see that.
Yeah. And the thing is, and this is just my opinion, but performance, once you get, in my opinion, once you get to about 4 seconds to 60, I don't know how much more performance you really need on just a regular road. That's just my opinion. But, because 4 seconds to 60 is
I'm
really
with you.
fast, you know,
I'm with you.
but as long, it has obviously more than that, but the performance doesn't matter. The appearance doesn't matter. When you get in this Ionic 5N and you floor it to the red line and you forget to shift until about 2 taps off the red line, that experience cannot be duplicated. And it basically says, here's the, what do you need to get that in a gas car in real life? I mean, you need a $80,000, $90,000, $125,000 minimum to get that experience. But in the Ionic 5N, you can just grab the experience really quickly at any speed, in any gear, and then turn it off. And without consequences, you're not messing up your transmission. You're not, thermally testing your engine. You're not going to break down on the side of the road because nothing actually happened. It's just software. And by the time those thoughts run through your head, that doesn't stop the dopamine. I can't, like I said, the video, the thumbnail literally says no words, and I could do this all day, but it's just going to look like I'm stumbling, trying to walk and chew gum at the same time. It really is.
Well, part of the reason I'm looking forward to getting back to Silver Spring is so that, I can go check out my local Hyundai dealership, see if they have any on the lot, see if it's possible to even do a test drive or at least sit in it with it on and experience some of those sensory
I can tell you
impulses.
I can tell you right now that my viewer went to the dealership with intent to buy. Like, I want this one. And they let him drive. They let him drive 2 other Ionic 5s and would not even let him get in it. He said he bought it with 3 miles on it because no one was allowed to drive it. So I don't blame them. I mean, it's essentially a Model S Plaid as far as the speed. It's like, hey, you want to test drive the fastest car on earth? I don't know if I'd let anybody do it either. So I really hope that you can find a happy Hyundai dealership that'll let you take a ride in it. But he said that in his neck of the woods, that was not an option. So
yeah, I definitely saw that, which kind of blew my mind, right? If you're asking me to buy a car from you, right, and like you said in the video, it ain't cheap, right? We're talking north of 60K, closer to 70, right? Yeah, I got to drive it, right? So
Well,
that would be a deal breaker for me.
I mean, I proposed it, but I was like, I'm just here to have some fun. I was like, in the event you want me to drive, we'll need to do some work and you can walk me through it. And he just immediately was like, no, I'll just take you for a ride. And that was, the deal was off for me there, because I knew I wasn't going to need to drive it to experience it. Go ahead.
That's my thing about this car, right? It's not like, well, there's a mode where you could just get in and drive it like any other EV, right? But what we're talking about here is the sound, the gear shifting, right? And all of this stuff that makes it feel like an ICE performance sports car.
Right.
Are you able to just get in and just, is it intuitive enough, or do you actually have to go through, somebody's got to walk you through, well, here's how you do this, here's how you shift the gears when you put it in, right? So that's my concern with it, is that there's so many nerd knobs that you have to have some sort of baseline understanding of how to operate this thing.
I think that, so yes and no. There's two N buttons on the steering wheel. One is like noise and shifting, and the other one is like performance mode. And if you don't ever, I feel like if you don't ever do anything else other than that, and there's a drive modes button on the steering wheel, but I think if you hop in this car without ever touching the screen, you can experience about 80% of this car's performance in every mode without even going into the screen. And then it's basically after that, it's just, there's no extent. It's just like a dive pool that never goes to the bottom. You can go as deep as you want. And so, yeah, you could hop in this car immediately and just, I mean, I've sat in a Hyundai and driven a Hyundai Ioniq 5 enough, and that for maybe 50 miles total, I've driven Hyundai products ever, but I'm confident I could get in there and figure out how to get to where I wanted to go without having to even look at the screen. So, like I said, don't walk, run to the dealership and get one of these. If you are into this kind of thing, and if you have somebody that has, I believe Matt mentioned a GTI and a Honda Prelude. I had a Civic Si, but if you know somebody who's into like manual cars and performance driving and paddle shifting, and they're skeptical about EVs because they'll lose that, but they're still into performance, because we all know performance can no longer be competed with gas cars. This is it. I mean, and for 67K, 70 out the door, that's pretty cheap for what you get. I mean, that's, you can't get a Rivian for that new. It's a pretty good deal.
Well, I'll wait and see what the used car market holds for it in a couple of years. Hell, maybe later this year or next year. But maybe this is a topic for a different day. As I start to think about what might my next EV look like, what might that be?
Right.
We'll save that for an upcoming podcast or video.
I think we could probably do an hour on that.
Yeah, I'm always looking around, seeing what's in the market, and especially being up here this summer, I think I know what it is. So
okay,
we'll come back.
You can save it. Yeah. For me, if I just was able to financially be able to just swap all the time, I think I would probably do 6 months with this Prologue, and then I would get a car that doesn't exist. But if the Fiat 500e was a convertible, that would probably be my next one.
So
I don't really. I don't care for Chrysler or Stellantis or Fiat, but I think it's a good looking car, and I don't care about range that much, or charging speed. I'm a splash and dasher anyway, and the convertible would be appealing. On the used market, it's the Smart 4.2 convertible. I'd love one of those.
So that's the only hint I'll give. It's a convertible.
Okay. All right. I'll leave it. I'll leave you to it, man. Well, let's let the audience decide in the comments. That's probably the best.
Yeah, comment below if you guys have a sense of what I'm talking about.
Hey, and they guessed my Prologue. I had one viewer guess the Prologue.
So we had a couple of interesting videos. One from Doug DeMuro, one from Engineering Explained. Doug DeMuro's video was titled "Are EVs Dead?" Right, and I think the premise of the video I agree with, right, which is no, they're not. That's his premise, but he pointed out some issues around range, around resale value, charging infrastructure, and perhaps we need a stopgap of plug-in hybrids. But what was your take?
A Better Route Planner says that if you take a trip from San Diego, where he wanted to go, and go to Nantucket, where he was going to, that the amount of charging is like 8 hours. Okay. Now, this is a 2-day drive, right? Is it not? I mean, nobody does this. I've done this. I've done a similar. I've done Tucson to Morgantown, and that was 2.5 days. And we stopped and we slept in Denver. And so, and it was just, just a road trip. We switched drivers. We were sleeping, in the car. It was like, how fast can we do it? It wasn't, we may have broken the speed limit in Kansas. That's alleged, but, we had a 91 CRX. It had an Integra engine. It had suspension upgrade, wheel upgrade. It was like a little rocket on wheels. And we may or may not have allegedly tested it out, but we just drove straight except for an 8-hour sleep. And that took 2.5 days. So over the course of 2.5 days, is 10 hours of charging really something you can even say is a bad thing? I mean, if you stop at a hotel with a level 2, that's going to eliminate at least 2 of those charges, right? And so that takes your charging down to around 6 hours. And I don't know, between the human bladder and just fatigue, I feel like if every time you got out, you plugged in the ABC method, always be charging, I just feel like it wouldn't matter. Who wants to get off the road and spend 14 seconds using the restroom and then get, it's not like he did a cannonball. So that was one of the points he made, was that he would never be able to drive an EV across the country. Resale value, this one, I'll ask you. I'm going to flip it back to you on resale value.
Before we go to that, let me touch on range for a second.
Please,
right?
Please.
I think range with EVs is a little bit of a myth, right? I don't think people understand what we're talking about with range a lot of times, right? 300 miles of range, call it 275, right? If you've got 275 miles of range, divide that by, let's say, 70 miles an hour, that's 4 hours of driving. And to your point about the human bladder, right? After 4 hours of driving, yeah, you're definitely ready to stop. I know in my case, I'm ready to stop closer to 3, right? So I don't think range is the issue, right? One of the other things he talked about is infrastructure and charging. That's the issue, right? Is making sure that you've got places that are hopefully reliable that you can stop and get your vehicle topped off at, right? And you just demonstrated there with a Better Route Planner that there are plenty of options that are out there. And the number of options is growing on a daily basis, right? In terms of Tesla building out their network, and tons of other charging providers. So I think it's something that's a real issue, but it's becoming less and less so as the funding coming out of IRA and the proliferation of those charging networks. So that's my thought on that.
Plus, how often are people getting stranded? If you type it into your nav system, it's going to tell you, hey, you've got an issue here, right? And you're typically at that point, you're either at home and you haven't left yet, or you're actually physically charging. Like your next destination. Right. Oh, well, you don't have enough charge to make it. I don't see how
use a cross country. You can't use a cross country trip as the example for EV range, because how many people are going to do that, right? Most people are going to look at that and say, you're out of your mind. I'm not even going to do that in, the most MPG gasoline vehicle or hybrid vehicle, right? I'm going to fly. I know a lot of people where if it's more than 4 hours to drive, they're flying. So it's very much an edge case that he was using as the example there, right? So I certainly did not agree with that. One of the other statements that he made was that we've already seen the height of EV adoption, which is insanity to me, right? One of the things that you and I have talked about, maybe you can pull it up, is the Gartner hype cycle, right? And what he's saying is that we've already peaked in terms of EV adoption. And I think really what he was trying to say is that, we've kind of hit the peak of what Gartner calls inflated expectations, right? And right now, my belief is that we are in the slope of enlightenment, right? Headed towards the plateau of productivity, right? I think we've already hit the trough of disillusionment, right? And now we're starting along that slope of enlightenment. That's where I think we are as a marketplace with respect to EV adoption. I'm not sure if you agree with that.
100%. I mean, the cell phones are the example that is easiest to look at, and people aren't going to quit buying EVs. There are more people that are going to adopt. I think Doug's assumption is that, well, if you live in an apartment, you're not going to get one. I think it's a very narrow-minded point of view, and maybe this is too critical, but it takes away a lot of his journalistic credibility to say the things he said in that video. And I think it's way more stilted toward personal opinion than it is journalism. I don't think he doesn't cite any articles. There's no research that backs up what he's saying that is credible. You can use a headline as research, I guess, but there are too many holes in that to be able to defend it. And like I said, and then the final topic was resale value. Here's the thing. When you put a $7,500 tax credit on EVs, especially everything up through August of 2022 was eligible for a tax credit. And if you have this tax credit available to you, you didn't pay what that sticker said, but yet people are looking at the values based on what the sticker said. And the whole point of EV adoption is for the sticker to get lower. That $7,500 tax credit, by reducing resale value, is doing exactly what its job was. That was the job of that tax credit. Yes, it's supposed to save you money on the purchase side, but it's also going to reduce resale value because people are going to be willing to get rid of them for a lower price because they didn't pay, what the number was. And I'm a living example of it. Right. I mean, how much motivation was that $7,500 credit for you?
It's huge. It's huge. In fact, I would not buy that. That's part of the reason now I won't buy a new EV. We love getting a deal, right? We love getting things on sale. We love getting things under market value, right? And in the case of our Rivian, I'll share that story from May of last year. We were able to use the transition rule, right? We were able to use the transition rule to get the $7,500 tax credit. So that's point one. Point two, because we were early reservation holders, we were able to get our Rivian at almost a $20,000 discount, right? Because if you had reserved your Rivian prior to, I want to say March of 2023, right? You were able to get their original pricing, and then they increased the pricing quite significantly. On our spec, I want to say it went up almost 20 grand, if not more, right? And so it became a no-brainer for us to move forward with the purchase, because the price on the day we were taking delivery was already $20,000 plus more, right, than what we were paying on that day to get it. And then we were able to use the transition rule. So we ended up getting north of $25,000 off the market price of the quad motor R1T, right? And so, and again, with the Rivian, I was also able to, not the Rivian, the Fisker, I was also able to use the transition rule there. So absent that, I will be looking at the used EV market, because to your point, right, people are going to be able to, some people are going to be able to get out of those vehicles for less, because they got deals like I just described, right? And so that's what I'm going to look to take advantage of.
Yeah, you don't want that initial depreciation to really kill you. And with these incentives and the discounts and the tax credit, it all kind of stops you from having to worry about that initial. And do you think that people in your position not getting the next coolest EV because they know they can't get a tax credit, do you think that has impacted new car sales as far as that market?
Yeah, I do think it has in the EV market, and we can see it in the numbers, right? Not everyone's taking the stance that I am, that, you know, I'm just going to look at used EVs. Some people are shifting strategy from purchase to lease, right? And we've seen the numbers for EV leases go like this, right? Way up. So,
no, in my opinion, that's a demand lever, because a dealership can adjust a lease price right now, right? They can say, hey, we need to lease all of these whatever on the lot because our floor plan is due. There is a $329 a month lease on the Prologue. And so I agree with you that leasing is
I really think, because what we're talking about here is the declining resale value, right? And leasing also, I get that it's a demand lever, but from the consumer side of things, it's a shield against depreciation. You're in and out in 2 years or 3 years. And assuming you can get the right mileage, right, based on your driving habits, with some of the deals that are out there, I can see how it makes sense for folks to go down that path.
Absolutely. When you get into that income bracket of not having disposable income, monthly payment being the most important decision maker, that's the adopter that the EV market doesn't have an answer for yet. Single vehicle families. They don't have an answer yet. That Model 3 needs to be 25 out the door. If that Model 3 is 25 out the door, that's supercharger network, long range, reliability, access to service, and you can drive it as far as, you know, I mean, that's just, there's no answer there.
Now, to that point, right, we've seen Tesla make some changes for Model 3s going into the Mexican market, right, where they've gone to a cloth fabric interior. They've removed the second row screen. The acoustic glass is pulled out, right? So they're making some changes in order to bring costs down so that they can bring the price down in that market. I'm wondering if you've got any thoughts on that, because it seems like they're piloting this in the Mexican market and potentially, you know, may bring that here, and maybe eliminate the need for a Model 2 if they can get that price to a good sweet spot.
In my opinion, the Model 3 is the Model 2. That's it. You know, I think they're going to come out with a base model or whatever because they're going to change the name 5 times before they decide what it's called.
Yeah.
But yeah, they're going to come out with a base model. It'll be software limited on the battery, or it'll just have a smaller battery, but I figure it'll be software limited on the battery. So because it's all about scale for them to build one thing and put it in everything. And they'll bring the price down. Here's the thing though, like, okay, final thoughts on this in this, because I think this has been a really valuable discussion. But do you think that should the political climate in the US change, is that going to have a negative impact on EV adoption, and where do you think it will?
Taking away some of the carrots will impact it. I don't think there's any doubt about that. If the political climate is such that we're not providing the incentives, then yeah, I think it could potentially slow things, but I don't think it's going to stop it. It'll just slow down the transition, which is my sense of what's happening, is that market and other forces are driving towards a slowdown. But this is an inevitability. It's going to happen. We're going to transition to battery electric vehicles. My thought is, if we know that that's the destination, what are we waiting for, right? I know there are certain things that have to happen in terms of resources being available, building out the infrastructure, beefing up the grid and all those things. But for an automaker like Ford and like other OEMs, they're behind. So I just don't think they can afford to delay this further, right? I think it's only going to hurt them in the long run. I think they
it's
should
all
have
about
stayed on the track that they were on.
If we go straight to EVs, you know, what happens to General Motors? From an investor standpoint, it's just destruction. Now, in my opinion, it's destruction that needs to be done. Like you said, what are we waiting for? But there'll be 2 quarters of bad news, right? Not just one, probably 2 quarters of bad news. Like, hey, we got to shut this factory down and retool it, right? That's a quarter. And then we got to do it with our suppliers as well. That's another quarter. And even if it's perfectly timed and it only impacts for 3-4 months, it's an impact. And when you have 100 layers of bureaucracy between a decision like that and somebody's job, I mean, got to pay the mortgage, right? You know.
Yeah.
That, in my opinion, that's the biggest holdup.
But what's your thought on plug-in hybrid as a stopgap?
I owned a plug-in hybrid. That is what got me to switch to EV. So in my opinion, if every company switches to plug-in hybrids and actually tries to sell them, that's the other side of this argument, is they're not going to try to sell them. It's basically just to stop the EVs. You know, how far backwards can we turn the dial is really what a plug-in hybrid argument is. But in the event that they try to sell plug-in hybrids, they will immediately have triple demand for battery electric vehicles, because that's what you do. You get in a plug-in hybrid, you drive it down the road in silence with regen, and it's amazing, and it feels great. You know you're not using gasoline, and then all of a sudden the engine kicks in, and it's twice as loud as your gas engine, and the car turns into this slug that doesn't run as well, and it's louder. And all you want to do is go, how do I get back to where I'm just electric again? Like, actively during the drive. And so you're going to drive more efficiently and all this, but it basically says, look, this is inferior to the human brain. It says, I am inferior in this mode. And you're like, well, why don't I just go full electric?
So,
I mean,
I think you're making great points, and I'm glad that you have the experience, because I've never owned or even, I don't even know if I've ever driven a plug-in hybrid. I don't think I ever have. Do you feel the same way with a technology like the Ram Charger, where the gasoline engine is in essence a generator to charge the battery?
You can call them whatever you want. You can call them range extender, plug-in hybrid, Power Max, right, extra power.
Okay, so they're all in the same basket of deplorables.
You get 40 miles of excellence and 280 to 300 miles of garbage. There you go. That's what it is. That's what your road trip is like. What they called my Clarity. That's what I had, a Honda Clarity. They literally had a name for it. It was called the Angry Bees because that's what the engine sounded like. It had an Atkinson cycle 4-cylinder, which is really efficient and does a really good job, but it's loud. It's not tuned for experience, right? All these engines are tuned for 100 years on what's the best experience while you're driving. Well, this Atkinson cycle is just like toss it in there and here we go, and the only way to stop it was to put it in sport mode to where it just constantly ran instead of trying to make up for lost time by running really quickly to put enough power in the battery for what you're asking for. So you ended up just driving it less efficiently all the time if you were on a road trip and you only got, 32 miles per gallon in this plug-in hybrid that's supposed to be great. I think plug-in hybrids teach people how to drive EVs for just long enough to get out. Now, on the other side of that, if I owned a plug-in hybrid for 3 years, I put 30,000 miles on it, and I spent $300 in gas. So is it affordable during that initial ownership period? Yes. They're super easy to own. And if these plug-in hybrids come out and they're all 30,000, sure, but they won't be. They'll be 40,000. No. So there's no argument for them cost-wise. But what it is that you lose 100 years of IP if you go electric. There it is. 100 years of intellectual property just in the garbage. Right? Duramax, EcoBoost.
Yep. We got a couple of things here before we land the plane. So Engineering Explained talked about LFP, and we also had Auto Trader talking about the cost of EV battery repair and replacement. Yeah. Why don't you just give us a quick synopsis on those two?
Yeah, the LFP study, which was done at a very high temperature, and this is high level here, but the LFP study, as far as cars with LFP, that's lithium iron phosphate batteries, was done at kind of a high temperature. And because of that, the 75 to 100% charges that most people do on a lithium iron phosphate, you got to charge to 100 because of voltage, essentially. The study said that 75 to 100% charges are worse for the battery. But you got to understand, this is a 4,000 cycle battery. If you have NMC, which you basically do at this point, unless you drive a Model 3 or a brand new Mach-E, if you have NMC, you got an 800 cycle battery. So, degradation on a 4,000 cycle battery when everyone's driving 800 cycle batteries. I mean, okay.
So you should probably explain what 400 cycle means, right? We're talking about the life span of the battery.
NMC is 800 cycles. LFP is 4,000 cycles.
Okay, so we're talking about battery life, where with LFP, it's significantly longer.
Correct. Yeah, and I'm glad you touched on that. So, in the event, and then the other thing about it is there's another study that says that 75 to 100% charges are the best. All I know is that Connie owned her Model 3 LFP for 3 years, and at 100% charge did not lose 1 mile of range, and she beat this car to pieces for work. And all it was 75 to 100% every day. So drive your LFP however you want. The only other point to take away from that is the study says treat it like a gas car, that you're a fill-up person. Because I know some people in gas cars are $5 here, $10 here. But if you're the person that every time I go to the gas station, I fill all the way up, treat your LFP EV just like that. And that's a really, really good case for prolonged battery life. That's probably all I need to say about the Engineering Explained video. I'll link it. It's very informational. And the reason I wanted to mention it is because you should check it out. So I appreciate you bringing that up.
Yeah, I also think, Adam, and I appreciate you providing that synopsis. I also think there's a bigger story here in that that is the direction that this industry is going, right? We're moving from NMC to LFP, and that's significant because we're talking about a lot less rare earth minerals used in LFP, right?
And
We're not
cost.
talking about exactly. So we're talking about lower cost, lower environmental impact. And I think it's really important for folks to understand that is that that's where our industry is going. It will just, I think, compound just how much better for the environment EVs can be down the line.
And then, you know, the next step is the sodium ion battery, which is real and is definitely going to happen. Very good discussion. And I agree with you. The transition from rare earth metals, cobalt, more specifically than anything, but nickel as well, and aluminum, you know, all of these basically worse than iron for the environment metals are going out of batteries as a trend. Well said there. ID Buzz, the pricing is out. What's your reaction?
They'll sell every one that they can make. That's point one. Point two is I think they really missed an opportunity in terms of range, and you were never going to get it from an efficiency standpoint. We're talking about a bus, right? So it was never going to be super efficient. So you needed a bigger battery in order to deliver more range, right? What when you think about a Volkswagen bus, what do you think about in terms of its primary use case?
Right.
Road trips, right? To launch it with a price 60, 70K, and I'm sure these will have market adjustments on them, right? At the VW dealers for less than 250 miles of range. I think that's going to limit to some extent really widespread adoption on it.
I think these are compliance driveway ornaments. I think they're nostalgia tools. You know, it's Tesla. What's the Tesla tequila?
Yeah.
They're the Tesla tequila of EVs. Like, if you got one, cool. But if you would have waited, you could have got any of them because now they sell it on the website. You can get a Tesla tequila. It's not that original bottle, but
right.
Here it is. You know, if you really wanted to drink that stuff, you can now. If you don't know what I'm talking about, the Tesla tequila was this limited edition. You know, I don't know what they sold it for, $70, $100, but you know, they were going for 2,500 online because Tesla only sold 100 of them and they sold out in 1 minute. And if you didn't follow Elon, you didn't get one. But these are driveway ornaments for boomers. I hate to say that, but because they priced it the way it did, because they didn't give us this, I don't see, in my opinion, I say scrap the 7 seats. Keep that same battery, scrap the 7 seats, give us 300 miles of range in the short one. You know, if you want to sell them, you know, if you bring that thing down.
It was a mistake, right? There'll be a short-term outcome, right, with them, you know, flying off of dealer lots. But I would have loved to have seen them do an electric Beetle, right? An electric Beetle would have been mass adopted, right? And with it being such a smaller, man, EVs are being built in that shape anyway for efficiency, right? So I don't understand why they didn't go down that path.
If I'm a marketing person at Volkswagen, the words coming out of your mouth are the same words I would say. Where's the new Beetle? Let's make as many buses as we can. Let's make the ID Buzz the best-selling vehicle on earth. You can do it. You could easily do it. They decided not to do it. And this $70,000 for 200 miles of range is not going to do it. It's just not going to cut it. And Auto Trader battery replacement, there was a video on that. They basically said that replacing an entire battery, you know, is the way that a lot of automakers are doing it right now. I think that they really missed the ball here. I mean, like, it's like sending a journalist that's never driven an EV on a road trip and then telling them to tell the world what it's like. This is what they've done with this. Who gets the battery when you provide a full battery swap, right? If I take the battery out and I put a brand new battery in as a warranty recall or as a warranty claim, who gets that battery? Right? The manufacturer does. You keep your IP in-house, and it's this that same conversation. If they make it so module swapping is a thing, it's like people talking about open sourcing the software for Fisker. Yes, they'd be able to solve Fisker's problems, but at the same time, they would create a we don't have to buy EVs from manufacturers problem, right? These people are just going to be like, well, we're going to convert all these old cars to EV. Why is that such a prohibitively expensive thing? It's because those resources aren't being readily available in the form of training and documentation and reference. And if they start saying, hey, let's train people how to swap modules, I mean, you want to talk about speeding up the adoption. That's the fastest way, is to tell people how to do it. Knowledge is power, man.
Yeah, and I think it ties into, on some level, right to repair, right? If we can get somebody other than the OEM doing this, but I still think we're a long ways out. And just to clarify, because I've seen this a few times now, it's not like when your battery goes out that you're getting a brand new one. They give you a refurbished battery that is representative of, the battery they're replacing.
And that's the other side of the argument too, is that if 90% of your car is the battery and it only costs $20,000, and I know putting only in front of $20,000 is, kind of controversial, but don't you end up with a brand new car?
So that was something that was talked about early in Tesla's existence, right? The battery swapping. It's never come to fruition for a lot of reasons, not the least of which they're not going to cannibalize their business, right? They're both their automotive business as well as their energy business, energy storage business.
So what if you had a 40-pound swappable battery that was SAE, just like CCS, right? It's 40 pounds, so basically a motivated human can pick it up. You can swap it at the gas station, and it's got, let's say, 3 to 5 kilowatt hours in it. Enough to get home. You got 2 batteries in every car, 3 batteries, 12 volt, this thing, and the high voltage battery that comes with it. But you've got this other battery that you can put in your car and you can swap it live. It's not the whole thing, but you can apply that technology to any vehicle. Put a small motor on one of the wheels that doesn't already run the car in the event of a 2-wheel drive, and you could turn any car into a plug-in hybrid in 10 minutes, and a battery swap is 1 minute. If they really wanted to swap batteries, you don't swap the whole thing. You swap a smaller secondary module. Motorcycles are already doing this. And you just go to your local vendor. It's like a vending machine. And all of a sudden, you've got a fresh charge. You don't have to, and it doesn't have to be a full fresh charge. It's just enough to get home, right? Do you have anything else you wanted to add?
I think we drained the swamp here tonight, Adam. Giving our audience a little bit of a sense of, when we connect, oftentimes on, either one of your long road trips, as was the case coming back from the Ioniq YN test drive, or on, one of my long road trips here, and we nerd out on lots of different EV topics. That kind of felt like what this was.
So we are in the deep end. If you're still watching, thank you, by the way, if you're still watching. But final point, this is a really important point. A lot of people, especially from the other side of the pond, have said that this holder in due course rule is unfair to Chase. Is Chase responsible, in your opinion? Did they play a role in some of these results?
So I think you made the best point in response to that question, which is we're not just talking about Chase. We're talking about Fisker Finance, and I think that's the key difference here, right? They essentially branded a financing product for this vehicle as Fisker Finance, and so yes, I think that puts them in jeopardy. Feels like too strong of a word, but you get my point, right?
It identifies them as that holder in due course. It basically ticks the box.
Exactly, puts them on the hook. They obviously have much deeper pockets than Fisker has, right? And so I think they could see this train coming in their direction, right? But it still remains to be seen. I really don't think we're going to see a ton of buyback decisions where people are getting what they paid, right? I think the remedies here are going to be significantly smaller than what people think they are.
Okay. I disagree. I think that Higgins Berman is going to comb through every one of these experiences, and they're going to have all of those reference
what do you think
documents.
the average remedy is going to be?
Buyback.
You know what the car cost. You think it's going to be buyback as in the full value of the vehicle?
I think what they're going to do is they're going to push those out first, because obviously these are individual arbitrations. So they can file them in any order they want, and they can find the best examples, right? If you get 75, 50, 100 decisions in a row, it's probably going to force Chase to think twice. They're either going to allow a class action, which now at that point, your opinion becomes very valid that that settlement may not be what you think it might. But for those first 100 people, I feel like the people that have the best case are going to get a really good settlement. There are already examples out there of complete and total buybacks that Chase has already done. The precedent is there. This is not an arbitration,
Are we talking about people with non-drivable Oceans?
That's the other thing. Higgins Berman has the ability to take those examples and hit them first, right? And now, like I said, your opinion is very valid. In the event there aren't as many of those as I think there are, then maybe not. But it is my opinion that the biggest downplayed fact of the Fisker saga is that there are a ton of people who have bricks right now. I really believe that. I believe there are 300 to 1,000 bricks right now that are owned by individuals. I may be wrong.
Well, here's where I stand on this. I sincerely hope that you're right, because I would love to see Fisker Ocean early adopters get any sort of a win, right? Because all we've gotten, or they now that we aren't part of the secret handshake group anymore.
That's right.
All they've gotten is kicks in the shins and upper regions from there, right? It's just been brutal. So I would love to see Fisker Ocean owners, those early adopters, get any sort of a win, right? And I hope that you're right. However, the way that I've seen things work with Fisker, the way I've seen things work in our country, it'll be a fraction, in my opinion. I think it'll be a fraction of what you paid for the vehicle. But like I said, I hope I'm wrong and there's more of a win there for those early adopters.
I do think that people in my position, like the refinancers and I already left my vehicle, I think those could be like 3-figure settlements, like $300, $900 after the fees and everything. Those could be, especially in my case. I don't even know if, and we'll see, but you guys are in the deep end, so I'll give you my full opinion. I don't think I have a case at all. I didn't have any missing features. I didn't pay for adaptive cruise. I mean, NFC card, second key fob, I really don't know where my claim's at, but I've reached out to them, and I'm gonna go through with it for the community in case, something does happen. But yeah, that's probably a good place to end, Brian. We have covered the whole thing. I mean, if we were at a campfire
tonight,
yeah, if we were at a campfire, that thing is put out. So I needed it. I definitely needed the conversation, and I always appreciate your takes. If there's anything you learn from this podcast, that we have great information on this channel, make sure you subscribe to Brian at the EVOG. I can't wait to talk more about your cars and upcoming journeys and everything else.
Thanks for joining us here on the August EVOG podcast and getting all the way into the deep end with us if you have been. Adam, thank you as usual, and we'll join you. Well, hopefully you'll be joining us again next month in September for another episode of the EVOG podcast. So
there you go. Secret word, moonshot. If you made it this far, give me a moonshot down below. Thanks for watching.